What's up guys, Infinity here, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about an extremely underrated indie horror series called Up the Killer. So I guess you could call this YouTube video Review Up the Killer. The Up the Killer series is currently made up of 8 games. All of these games are relatively short single-sitting games that are freely available on GameJolt. The games, despite technically being horror, aren't scary at all, and just saying that they're horror games doesn't really accurately describe them. They're more so dialogue-driven walking simulators that have a heavy use of horror themes to create an extremely well-written and surreal comedy. Since a lot of the appeal of the games are from the story and dialogue, here is a spoiler warning. This is a full spoilers review of the series. I highly suggest playing the games blind first, and as said earlier, all of the games are available for free on GameJolt. With that out of the way, let's dive straight into the first game of the series, Voice of the Killer. The game takes place in the zine of strange occurrences, with its writer, BB, being the protagonist. BB works at a life insurance company called Life Contracts, and we start the game in front of their building. Behind the starting location is a really long street, so we instinctively spend a minute walking down it. Sadly, there's nothing of note at the end, so then I walk back and actually start playing the game. One thing that you might have noticed from the footage is BB's commentary. Through most of the game, BB will be commentating about the events around her. Walking past these floating eye symbols will update her commentary to be about the area, so it's important to pay attention for them to get the full scope of the story. You might have also noticed the game's 2.5D art style and how everything is drawn in a simple, digitally drawn art style. I personally love the way that the game looks, and its visual appeal was the biggest reason I was drawn to playing the game in the first place. BB's character sprite especially looks really quirky. Once inside the building, it's very clear that something is off. BB is given a strangely worded letter, and everyone but BB is covered in sheets, and she acts very casual about everything going on. This is a recurring theme in the series, with everyone and everything but BB usually being extremely weird, and BB typically not being very surprised by it. After doing a few phone calls, BB takes a coffee break and we get to explore more of the office. Inside of the printer room, we find that the town has an extremely high rate of murder. The room is also covered in pieces of paper with blood being printed out, but BB is more worried about not being able to use the work printers as a zine distro. Eventually, I end up in a hallway full of police officers. Moving forwards, we end up in another, slightly more ominous hallway, and the door locks behind us. There's a meeting room with some vague writing, and the hallway is much darker when we walk back out of the room. At the end of the hallway is a much bigger room where I get caught by these shadow creatures. I wake up in a room full of police officers, including a named character called Cool Officer. He's quirky, but gets the job done. It was never explained why BB was captured, especially with how unintelligible Cool Officer's dialogue is, but we were able to just walk out of the room. Now in a new area of the building completely unfamiliar to BB, a group of shadow people are preparing for the arrival of someone called the Killer. Walking around a bit more, I find a dark room with a phone. BB is seemingly attracted to the phone and starts saying meaningless syllables into the phone until ending up in a red beach full of hair and shadowed figures. In the distance is a table with a tongue. BB eats the tongue before waking up, for events of the game seemingly a dream. However, she gets a phone call that the office is burnt down overnight and she is now jobless. A lot of stuff happened in this game, most of it is described very abstractly. Despite being only about 10 minutes long, Voice of the Killer was a very memorable game and was an extremely strong start to the series. There's a lot of potential for this game to expand in its story, and I'm looking forward to playing the next. My biggest complaint about this game, however, is its camera. The camera is really clunky, and it's often difficult to see when turning around by any major amount. He was hoping this gets fixed in the later games. The second game in the series is Hands of the Killer. BB is chilling in her apartment when she hears voices screaming outside, and her apartment's nightly security system blocks off the windows with protective shutters. She casually blames this on the killer, who seems to be some sort of serial killer in the town, and says that she really needs to take a walk right now. We meet ZZ, BB's sister, and the two have started an online retro nostalgia store. They're low on stock, so BB also needs to go and find some stuff lying around to sell. Now in the apartment's hallways, the game's camera issues have sadly still not been fixed. Anyways, moving onwards, I walked around the apartment until getting to the laundry room. Inside of the laundry room is an open vent that we can crawl through to get to another building. Crawling through the vent changes the game to first person, which I thought was pretty cool. It takes a painfully long amount of time to turn though, but this isn't too much of an issue since the segment is really short. At the end is what seems to be another building, but it turns out that the town just opens up and closes off different parts of the same building to change with the times. BB is hoping to find some retro stuff from going far into the layers of the apartment. The next part of the game is made up of exploring the building and seeing BB comment on the various things that she finds, and the dialogue is extremely well written. I had a lot of fun walking around the interesting environments and reading the lines, and this part didn't overstay its welcome. As we explore, there's eventually a strange area that seems to be some sort of waiting room. We knock on the room's door and a voice asks us some questions. We're eventually invited inside, but get captured by a group of hooded people. One of them mistakes us for a My First Strangle Victim doll, which just so happens to look and act exactly like BB. The people here don't seem to have the ability to distinguish dolls from actual people, and it looks like he's going to be torturing us as part of their college that dissects dolls for research. They leave to go to a committee meeting, and BB is able to escape because they also don't know how to tie knots. This is also the first time we see BB actually realistically freaking out about something, though she seemingly instantly recovers after the members of the committee leave for their meeting. Now we have to escape the college, which is filled with random power tools and the sounds of things getting cut with them. Walking through the hallways, we also have to avoid getting caught by the college students, and getting caught will get us sent back to the room that we started in. They're fairly easy to avoid, but the camera control sometimes makes it hard to see where they are or where you're going. While escaping, you can find a piece of paper that describes that the college wants to perfect the art of murdering because murderers create history and they want to create a universe entirely devoted to murder. They also consider the possibility that the universe is already entirely devoted to murder. The college is really obsessed with murder as an art, and the game makes fun of this by having members of the college all act like stereotypical everything is art and everything is deep art majors. Apparently, they also record themselves killing people and release it as horror movies with poor reception. We then get chased by the professor himself. In escape, BB pulls a random lever on the wall. This causes the security system of the apartment building to disable, and the killer enters the building. In a short contrast to the rest of the game, everything suddenly becomes genuinely eerie, and the killer kills the professor. Quickly escaping through the vent, you can see bodies of the students hanging from the ceiling as the killer massacres the mortal college that looked up to him so much. The game ends with us falling through the bottom of the vent, ending up back in our apartment room. Sadly, BB was not able to find many retro products to flip. Overall, I think Hands of the Killer was a significant improvement from Voice of the Killer. Not only did I find the dialogue to be better written, but I found the game itself to be more interesting with its story and gameplay. Despite the camera issues, I really liked the part of the game where I had to sneak out of the mortal college, and the cutscene where BB gets captured was a really fun way of conveying the story that wasn't done in Voice of the Killer until the ending cutscene. The third game in this series is Drool or the Killer. This time, BB is investigating a mysterious bus in her neighborhood, labeled Tammy, that no one seems to use. Immediately after finishing the opening cutscene, there's a very clear upgrade in the visual presentation. The small portion of the neighborhood that we're able to see is really well detailed, and it looks like it could actually be lived in. I'd love to see something like an RPG take place in this exact art style. Though Paper Mario and Bug Fables are similar, the other Killer games have a certain abstractness that those two games don't have. Maybe it's from the game's horror elements. Continuing on with the actual game, BB enters the bus, which takes her far away to a building simply labeled Tammy. I see some more buildings in the distance and try to walk to one of them, but there sadly doesn't seem to be anywhere else that you could go. I enter the Tammy building, which seems to be some sort of indoor water park. BB impulsively buys a season pass and decides to go swimming. The pool itself is really chill, but there's something clearly wrong. Other than the hyper-realistic water, BB has been acting really strangely since entering the Tammy building. From the writings on the wall, it seems like someone called Tammy drowned here and now controls the place. We enter a steam room, but then suddenly get captured by Tammy. We now end up in a room that leads us through some pipes. At the end is the 4th floor of the building, where I wander around some more. Eventually, I reach a room that's far enough away from the pool that BB regains her sanity. According to the dialogue, the Tamification hasn't reached the room yet, which used to be an office building. Past the room is a hallway with some paintings and signs. In 1992, Tammy was drowned by the killer and now haunts historic buildings. In death, Tammy received a vision about the next economy. Economy 2. Somehow, waterparks have a major role in the post-Economy 2 society. We're then greeted by Tammy, who chases us through the now flooded office rooms. We escape through the sauna and end up back at the pool, which is now really dark. BB feels the random urge to swim, and then gets captured by Tammy. Now in this flooded world, Tammy explains that she wants to create a place where families can enjoy drowning together, describing it as the nicest way to go. Heading through a door that takes us through some dark corridors, we get cornered by Tammy in the storage room. Tammy reveals that she doesn't chlorinate her pool, and therefore no longer has any use for the cleaning supplies. This angers BB, who hits Tammy with the chlorine container and then pours chlorine in the pool. This causes Tammy to dissolve, and BB gets launched back out to the road by a strong flood of water. Tammy's water park now gone, BB's life returns to normal, except the Tammy bus now passes by her apartment. I really like the ending of Drool the Killer. I think BB stopping Tammy with the chlorine was genius, and I appreciated the tonal whiplash of the comedic ending compared to the rest of the darker game. Overall, I feel like the tone of the game was darker than the first two, with BB actively getting hunted down through a lot of it. That's not to say there wasn't comedy, and there was a lot of god tier lines spread throughout. However, I didn't enjoy the game as much as Hands the Killer. The Murder College was a much more interesting antagonist, and I feel like Drool the Killer was a bit too tame and normal for the series. It wasn't bad by any means, I still enjoyed my time with the game, but one of the major appeals of the last two games were how crazy they were with their set pieces and dialogue, and Drool the Killer didn't really live up to that. I also found the pure chase sequences of Drool the Killer to be less fun than walking through the labyrinth of the Murder College and avoiding the students. Here's hoping that the next game, Eyes the Killer, is able to surpass the previous games. One night in autumn, I woke up to find 3 people knocking on my apartment door. They smiled and said that they've come to let me know my big opportunity was close at hand. I said nothing, having expected this for some time. I knew it was my turn to volunteer for the immersive theater. The game begins in first person, the road shrouded in darkness. An eerily lit building stands before me. The director of the play welcomes me in, and I make my way through the immersive theater. The strongmen foretell of the slaughter of the scalemen, and we enter Count Masco's party. Count Masco is displeased by the presence of Mr. Sun and Mr. Moon in his party. Meanwhile, Posty the mop girl looks at the party from afar. Another character, Prison Man, stands in the party, and the partygoers complain about his presence. I know they say it's safe, but I wish they wouldn't let Prison Man in the house. Meanwhile, Count Masco, annoyed by Mr. Sun and Mr. Moon's bickering, asks an old friend for help. Going ahead, I find Posty the mop girl dead on the ground, killed by an unknown person. Further along, I hear someone complaining about Posty's death. Looking through the curtain, we see BB, who is playing Posty in the play. She wants to know who killed Posty, but she isn't told even though she's the actress because it's more immersive. The scene also reveals that the character we've been following so far is just a nameless spectator enjoying the play. Stepping away from the curtains and following a series of signs supposedly leading to refreshments, the spectator is then captured by people in bear suits. Already, the game started off by giving us the strongest intro in the series yet. We then cut back to BB, who decides to wander around to find the truth about her character's death. While exploring, BB watched a scene between Count Masco and a wizard named Mappy. Count Masco asks Mappy for help in getting rid of Sun and Moon, but Mappy gets disappointed over Count Masco's reason for inviting him. Mappy explains that Count Masco captured the prison man and used him to build the estate, and that he should use the power of Prison Man. The scene ends and BB finds Mr. Moon's actor. She tries to ask him if he knows about her character's death, but Mr. Moon interrupts her, simply stating, "The walls of the city are giving off sound. Under orking thorns, oh my brother blind minute hands, we are climbing towards midnight." BB walks away and watches another scene. Mappy is telling Count Masco to give Prison Man back his original power, that Count Masco has the natural authority to still control him, but then the lights suddenly shut off, and Prison Man captures Masco, seemingly out of script. BB turns around and everyone in the hallway is suddenly gone, the lights noticeably darker. The room is also completely different from the one she was originally in. The walls are painted with the design of bleeding eyes, and the only exit is an ominous trapdoor on the floor. BB goes down the trapdoor, ending up in a dimly lit wooden hall with a black liquid dripping from above. BB considers the possibility of giving up her investigation, and just wants to escape. At the end of the hallway is a room of creepy puppets and other props. BB opens up a door and a pile of costumes falls on her. Meanwhile, Prison Man enters the room. He doesn't notice BB hidden under the costumes and leaves. BB wonders where he's going and decides to follow. Passing through an increasingly ominous walkway with cages, BB finds Prison Man walking up a path in a giant room. An unseen chorus begins to sing as BB rises as well, eventually finding Count Masco at the end of it. He begs BB to free him, stating that the script was just changed. However, his cage gets pulled into the air as he begs for it to stop. Meanwhile, BB is really mad that Count Masco didn't break character and just walk outside of his balsa wood cage. Not understanding how theater works, she gives up and pulls away the curtains from the wall. Behind is an empty movie theater-like viewing area, and past that is a series of costume rooms. In the distance, movements of people in bear suits can be seen. BB continues on, passing a sign that points towards refreshments. She wants to follow the bear suit people and ask them for directions. However, she steps on a hidden trapdoor on the floor, and this happens. It's Cool Officer from Voice of the Killer, and he calmly explains to BB that there's nothing to worry about and that the police were just mutilating people with power tools and were going to kill her. BB runs away, starting a chase sequence. She cries out for help to the rest of the audience as she runs, but they only see it as part of the immersion. The dialogue in this game has already been god tier, but some of the lines in this specific part of the game are especially good, such as, "If I get chopped to pieces, it would be your fault." Truly, we're all complicit in brutality. It makes you think. Who says art can't have a message? Glug, glug, glug. If you get caught during the chase, you spawn back at the start with BB escaping via the old switcheroo. Eventually, BB finds safety in the dressing room. Inside is also the director of the theater. The director tells BB that some of her acquaintances once lived near BB, and then reveals herself as part of the murder college. BB tries to justify her action of deactivating the security system, but the director actually thanks her, stating that she was meaning to kill them off anyways because franchising dilutes the message. And BB's events in the murder college were sold as a VHS that made some money. Then, the director explains that the immersive theater isn't a front for the police, but instead that the police are part of the theater as well, as our audience desires prisons, mirrors, and violent deaths. The funding for her theater keeps growing, the theater gets bigger and bigger, and reveals that her audience that funds the theater is part of an organization called the Art Appreciators Club. BB then enters a large, pitch-dark room, and suddenly, a spotlight reveals itself to be a stage. The sun has hidden, darkness has begun, let us all take knives and wait locked up. A holiday should be established, the day of victory over the sun. Listen to the art of life, the horns of death ringing in the words. Sleep to waken with the sun, mirror of the black earth, Caesar. The universe being a prison, it is my duty to build smaller prisons, in the hope of doing so will grant me the insight of the sacred geometry of heaven. To rule each prison, there must be a warden whose secrecy, caprice, and limitless capacity for violence act as an image of the fates to be studied and interpreted by those enthralled by his baleful rule. Caesar, Caesar, we who are dead salute you. Caesar, Caesar, we who are dead salute you. God blimey, now this is a remote do. The lights dim and BB's conscription in the theater ends. She returns home with her $20 paycheck. So Ice the Killer. That was a lot. This was a much more dialogue-focused game than the previous 3, but I think that was to its benefit. Even though most of the dialogue might seem like nonsense at first, there's actually a lot being told. There's also the confusing, seemingly unexplained appearance of the killer at the end of the game. Let's try to figure this out. The Mortal College, as explained by the director, was an extension of the Art Appreciators Club. This is the most important piece in figuring this puzzle out. The Mortal College had an obsession with mortal, deeming it as an art and wishing for a world that purely existed for the sake of mortal to create history and a new era. From what we've seen of the Art Appreciators Club, though, they don't seem to want to create history from mortal or a world purely of mortal, and this could be the diluted message that the director was talking about. However, both have a fascination with the killer and the act of killing. What is it that the Art Appreciators Club seeks? Something really important to bring up here is how the Art Appreciators Club is spelled. The apostrophe is placed before the S, not after it. This implies that there was a singular art appreciator, and that the director and patrons are part of the club started by the appreciator, not necessarily the appreciators themselves. The so-called art in the Art Appreciators Club seems to be mortal. However, a big difference to note between the college and the club is who is committing the murders. In the college, seemingly all the students were practicing murder, and at the very least, the professor did so with his stringle dolls. In contrast, we were only shown 2 instances of murder in Ice the Killer. The first is with the police, who I believe to be a separate but still somehow connected faction. The second is at the very end, when the killer is standing above the bodies of Mr. Sun and Mr. Moon. Though Count Masco is captured by Prison Man, we don't actually see him get murdered or be dead. I believe that the Art Appreciators Club, worshipping the killer, wants him to be the one to kill and appreciate the art of it, not the members of the club itself. This is supported by the dialogue during the final parts of the game. The dancer's darkness that they refer to is the night, but also the killer that comes along with it. From what we know so far in the series, every instance of the killer murdering happens during the night, thus the locks and hands of the killer. The dancers also say, "Wait locked up," and the theme of the lock reappears throughout the scene. Next is the New Source dialogue. The day of victory over the sun. This references it becoming night again, the thorns of death ringing in the woods. This references the sounds of screaming that can be heard at night as shown in Hands of the Killer. Sleep to waken with the sun, mirror of the black earth. Sleeping at night leads to the morning of course, but he also mentions the mirror of the black earth during this morning. Why a black earth? This is clearly a negative connotation for something, and Prison Man's dialogue might answer this. The universe being a prison, the black earth may refer to the prison, i.e. the universe. This is a bleak view on life, but death is seen as a good thing by many of the characters, such as Cruel Police using the power tools, or Tammy during Drool the Killer. Symbolically, freedom from the cage, which is the black earth, would be death, and who brings the most death to the city? The killer. This could also be part of why the club worships the killer. They see him as bringing freedom to the city, rather than bringing a new era and writing history as the Mortal College saw. The daylight, when the killer isn't active, also seems to be seen as a bad thing. The source refers to the sun as a mirror of the black earth, a mirror of the thing that they all want to escape. When the mirror is gone, at night is when the killer, the liberator, is active. Next is Mappy's dialogue. He states that the prisons need a warden with limitless capacity for violence, as in the Black Earth needs a killer, the killer. His violence will, quote, act as an image of the fates to be studied and interpreted by those enthralled by his baleful rule. Note studied and not performed like the Mortal College that was killed by the killer. Also important here is Image of the Fates and those entwined by his baleful rule. Image of the Fates confirms that they worship the killer in the holy manner. Those entwined by his baleful rule also confirms that the killer is the ruler of something. Rule the prison as in the Black Earth, yes, but those entwined by is also an important part of the line. Entwined is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as to deposit a dead body into the earth or a tomb. This could be taken in two ways. Entwined could be taken poetically, as with the theme of death, as those simply placed under his rule, which could forward the evidence of him being the art appreciator club's appreciator in question. On the other hand, entwined could be taken literally, as in those killed by the killer. The members of the Mortal College were still alive, yet studied the killer and were killed by him in return. However, one problem arising with this is that the Art Appreciators Club also seemingly studies the killer, or at least someone had studied enough of the killer for the information said here to be known by the club, as we've seen no dialogue from the killer himself. Though the Mortal College straight up made an entire school for studying Mortal, which is on a much more extreme scale than the implications of studying within the club. Finally, we have the final Caesar Caesar we who are dead salute you. This is where the killer appears playing the character of Caesar and standing above the dead bodies of Mr. Sun and Mr. Moon. The "we who are dead salute you" line might seem a bit problematic. Who is the we that is dead? What they are singing could be from the perspective of the dead Sun and Moon, in which case everything would be fine. However, it wouldn't make much sense for the singing to be from the perspective of the dancers, Surf, Prison Man, Mappy, or Caesar, since they're still alive, and if it was from their point of view, then that would mess up our definition of death, which would mean that the Mortal College may have been able to study the killer, and thus making the evidence from the line pointless. It just makes more sense for the we to be about Sun and Moon though, and it also keeps all the evidence together, so I'll go with that for now. Of course, this is all just my interpretation of the story, and I could be wrong. And now, my overall thoughts of Eyes of the Killer. I loved it. A significant evolution and improvement from Drool of the Killer, and by far my favorite in the series so far, if my enthusiasm to analyze the story didn't make it clear already. The story of the game was the most complex yet, but also the most entertaining. Every line of dialogue was written perfectly, giving great details about the compelling story, being really funny, or both. If I had to make a complaint about the game, the turning speed during the first person section at the beginning was still really slow like in Hands of the Killer, but that's a very minor issue compared to how great every other aspect of the game was, and I'm extremely excited to check out the next game, Flesh of the Killer. The game starts with us breaking into a building by hiding in a crate. This time, we're also accompanied by some other characters. After walking around a bit, it's revealed that we're in the Museum of Moral Art, a private museum, and that we've come to see an urban legend. The others with BB are Max, Claude, and Ray, who are each representing a different art field. Walking around and examining the works, a name that commonly pops up is Empty Lot. Later on, we're stopped by a locked door, and I walk to the other direction to find a keycard. After opening the door, Claude tells us some info about Empty Lot, stating that he is one of the top neo-moral artists. However, Empty Lot was one day arrested for eating a woman. On our way forward, we pass by a series of elephant paintings that BB finds creepy. Eventually, we find a room where Claude finds an Empty Lot painting that he doesn't recognize, and the paint is still wet. Moving onwards, we find a goofy eye creature walking on the painting. It sees us, turning around and putting on a lion mask. Max tries to knife it, but gets eaten, and the rest try to run away. We get caught, however, and BB wakes up in a strange-looking area filled with statues and green plants. She also looks different, colored yellow with minimal detail. At the end of the area is an elephant-like creature that chases BB back, causing her to fall out of a painting, now returning to normal. It seems that that painter had put us inside of a painting, and paintings of the other characters can be seen hanging around. Though I was confused at first why out of anything an elephant would be chasing us inside of the painting, I realized that the elephant probably represents the elephant from the paintings that BB found creepy earlier in the game, which would be a cool detail. At the end of the room is a door, except the door is actually a painting and traps us again. The inside of this painting is much more eerie, with photorealistic textures of paint making up the walls. BB's paint sprite is also purple instead of yellow this time, likely because of the purple paint on the walls, another cool detail. Also in the painting are strangers, who have apparently committed unspeakable crimes for unintelligible reasons, and also haunt the doors of the ideal. Nearby the strangers is a painted figure representing the killer, painted purple like the many doors also near the strangers. Could the so-called doors of the ideal possibly be the killer as well? The one who so many people in the town look up to as almost a saint or a savior? If so, why do the strangers haunt him? Could it be that the strangers who commit unspeakable crimes for unintelligible reasons are the true killers, somehow manipulating the killer? We've never seen the killer speak, so it could be possible that he's some sort of remotely controlled robot. Also, the crime of creating a silent killer vessel to control. Would that crime, as in the killer, be seen as unspeakable in a literal sense? This is just extreme speculation though, and it might be cleared up in one of the later games. Past the strangers is a door that takes BB out of the painting and back into the building, in some sort of boardroom. A picture of the directors hangs in the wall, the members anonymized to protect the safety of the city's leading families. BB finds the glowing eyes familiar. Leading families, red eyes, pointy silhouettes, and art. I think it's most likely that the museum is owned by the Art Appreciators Club. Could Empty Lot potentially be the art appreciator in question? Though he seems much more like an art creator rather than an appreciator. Also in the room is a mission statement, stating that mortals in the city have increased their interest in moral ideals and that a vault will protect the art from tax responsibility. Quote, "There is some comfort to know that even when everyone is dead, morality can last forever." Outside of the room, BB finds Claude self-flagellating himself with a security lanyard. He thinks that the eye creature from earlier was some sort of morality robot, so he's decided to repent to avoid getting eaten. BB decides to rescue Ray and Max, who have been captured in paintings, and then escape the museum. Further along, we find a note that details Empty Lot and his robotic creation. Quote, "Realizing morality was too important to be left to human fallibility, he set out embodying it in immortal objects known as works of art. Using capital acquired from his many supporters in the NGO space, he soon began work on his most ambitious project yet." Next to the note is a picture that resembles the lion mask from earlier. It looks like the humanoid part of the robot was never finished, so there's only the lion mask, eye, and weird stringy hands. Past the note, the two find a painting with Ray and Max in it. However, the robot appears and puts BB and Claude in it. The inside of the painting has a really surreal look, with realistically drawn flora and compressed pictures of statues making up most of the environment. At the end, BB reunites with the three, where they were now expecting to be killed by the robot. However, BB realizes that it might just be responding to moral images without knowing what it means. The group then disguises themselves as a moral play, stopping the robot before it kills them. Then, Ray jumps on the back of the robot and the gang beat it to death. The robot now killed, they leave the painting and museum. In the ending cutscene, it's explained that Empty Lot continued to be relevant and was adapted into a cartoon. Looking at the image provided, we can see an eye between the jacket of what I think is supposed to be Empty Lot. I think it's supposed to be the robot pretending to be Empty Lot, though I thought the robot was killed, and I have no idea why they would represent Empty Lot in the cartoon using the robot. I genuinely have no idea what this image says about the lore. Overall, I think Flesh the Killer was a good game, though it wasn't able to live up to the extremely high precedent that Eyes of the Killer had set. The museum wasn't as interesting of a setting as the theater was, though I did enjoy the more surreal visuals that the paintings were able to accomplish. The plot was also not that interesting compared to the rest of the series, and I felt it was too straightforward without enough funny dialogue to make up for its simplicity. Additionally, the cast was pretty weak. Despite this being the only game so far where BB isn't solo in her adventure, the three characters that joined her are extremely forgettable, which really sticks out when almost every character in the series is extremely memorable. Even extremely minor characters like Cool Policeman or Prison Man were much more memorable than any of the trio. However, I did still enjoy the game. In terms of a ranking, I'd put it above Drool the Killer and Voice the Killer, but below Hands of the Killer. Now, the sixth game in the series is Blood of the Killer. The game starts with BB delivering a package in a dark room. A red figure appears and BB suddenly wakes up, the event having been a nightmare. She's on a train to Rivertown, where a new zine distro was started with help from her city. However, communication has recently stopped, and BB was sent to re-establish contact with someone named Clarice. Rivertown is the home of the world's largest drinking board, and there's a lot of people with board-shaped heads. This is definitely not a dangerous sign in the world of the killer. On our way to Clarice's apartment, we pass by lots of drinking boards, as well as a trenchcoat figure moving around. BB finds Clarice's apartment burnt to the ground and is approached by the trenchcoat figure, who introduces himself as a murderer. He mistakes BB as a fellow murderer and notes that, quote, "Boy, I was surprised to hear that they sent two of us out here. I guess this town must be a bigger deal than it looks," and that he's almost done with his report. He then hands BB a map, saying, "Here's the list of other places on the same supply chain. Check them out and try to re-establish contact." After BB leaves, a bored woman appears behind the murderer and kills him. That's a lot to take in during the opening minutes of the game. The murderer is clearly part of some sort of organization, likely somehow related to the destruction of Clarice's apartment. The bored woman seems to be part of a different unknown faction, as she cuts the murderer's head off and doesn't wear a mask that the murderer implies that everyone in his organization wears. Does the bored woman have something to do with the killer? So far in the series, everything board related seems to represent the killer in some way. We then cut back to BB, who is at a coffee shop looking over a map. With no other leads on finding Clarice, she decides to go to the location on the murderer's map. We then see an awesome top-down view of the map with a tiny BB sprite. 10 out of 10 game. The first place I head to is a record shop, which has unfortunately happened to have recently experienced a massive fire and is covered in ashes. Proceeding in, we find some sort of transport tunnel. Inside, BB is followed by these two robotic nurses, who discuss breaking her legs and capturing her. They then approach BB, telling her that she must be punished for her crimes as a murderer, and that she is a murderer because she was seen with Murderer X, the guy killed by the boardwoman earlier. They chase her, but BB manages to escape the record store. Next, I decide to go to the street market, which is selling a lot of drinking boards. At the end of the market is a door that leads into a dark room. At the end of the room is a document titled Drinking Board Mark II Production Note. It basically explains that Grace can appear purest in humanoids but have either no or infinite consciousness, giving the examples of a jointed mannequin or god. Since the document is talking about drinking boards, and the killer is a board, and his followers see his murdering as a good thing, if Grace is taken as killing, this could support my theory that the killer is some sort of automaton, since, quote, "Grace return once perception has traversed the infinite such that it simultaneously appears in the purest of bodily structure or which possess an infinite consciousness." Very awesome theory crafting potential from this initially gibberish looking note. BB then notices ominous sounds coming from a lower level of the building. Heading down, she finds the boardwoman from earlier, now repeatedly stabbing a knife into a pile of flesh. BB recognizes her as Clarice, and Clarice starts chasing BB with a knife. After running outside, there's a really cool scene where we get to play as Clarice trying to find BB in the outdoor market. However, BB is hiding behind a painting and manages to avoid Clarice. The next location I go to is the book depository, which has shockingly burnt down. An uncharted pile of papers, seemingly placed after the fire, remains above the wreckage, titled A True Secret History of the Murderers and Wreckers by a Concerned Citizen. Trying to read these papers is like trying to read foreign cursive while having a migraine and thinking that it's somehow English. However, I was able to find some interesting info within this. The record history of the murderers and wreckers is the false history which stands in place of the true history, evident to the merest child that the false history which the wreckers and murderers seek to substitute for the glorious true history of the world. The first thing to note here is that Concerned Citizen seems to separate the murderers and wreckers into two groups. I'm assuming that the wreckers are the people who are burning down the buildings, since Murderer X seemed to be investigating the buildings as an outside faction compared to those who did it. It also would have made sense for the murderers to have burned down the book depository, since Murderer X was already killed by Clarice, and he seemed to be the only murderer dispatched here, shown through his surprise to find BB. He also likely thought that BB was a murderer because she was investigating the burnt apartment, the same thing that he was doing. However, this brings up the question on what faction the Norses and Clarice would be brought up, since they don't seem to be with Mordor X's Mordor group. If I had to guess right now, I would say that Clarice is part of the Red Horse, since she killed Mordor X for investigating the destroyed apartment and tried to kill BB as well, who was with Mordor X and might have mistakenly identified her as a Mordor. The Norses also tried to kill BB after mistaking her as a Mordor and were also present in the burnt down record shop. I think it would make sense that they might be part of the Red Horse as well. The other thing I'm noted to find here is the so-called false history that the Mordors and the Red Horse are seemingly wanting to create over the glorious true history. This could be referencing the new history that the Mordor College aims to create in Hand of the Killer. However, Mordor X's clothing looks nothing like those of the Mordor College. His organization wears masks though, which might mean that the Mordors were forced to the immersive theater, though I'm not really sure what they'd be interested in regarding the burnt buildings. Additionally, we also can't rule out the possibility that the Mordors that Mordor X is part of is a completely new faction located outside of both Essex City and Rivertown, since Mordor X's faction does not seem to be from Rivertown. The rest of the writing didn't seem to have anything of relevance that I could find, and behind the papers is someone who seems to be the concerned citizen. BB chases him as he runs away, leading her into an empty movie theater. On the walls of the theater are many depictions of hands, which resemble those on the Mordor College's uniform. We also learn that the movie theater was preserved for historical preservation. BB doesn't end up catching Concerned Citizen and is off to the next location, the Rivertown Historical Society. The inside is filled with board-related artifacts, and the intercom begins talking to us. Therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. Welcome, welcome, lover of history. Welcome to the Museum of Mechanical Boards. Yes, yes, more than just drinky boards. Though they form the firm foundation on which our fair town is built, we must strive to see beyond them, move beyond them, as our fathers did. Yes. The mention of history in fathers is interesting, as those are two words Concerned Citizen used a lot in his papers. The intercom continues. The immortal golden board, glory of changeless metal, well, plastic, ha ha ha. But the tradition remains the same. Alive, vital, living, unliving, images of grace, images of fear. Finally, we start to get at least a remote idea of this so-called false history Concerned Citizen was against. The change from drinking boards to a golden board made out of metal or plastic. What's also important is the living, unliving images of grace part. A drinking board, or drinking board, is an actual real-life toy, obviously not alive, but it does move. However, this golden board in question is not a drinking board, but also alive and unalive. The mention of metal is also interesting, though the intercom does seemingly correct itself to say plastic. I feel like this is adding more evidence towards my theory of the killer being a robot. Maybe someone in Rivertown created the killer and Concerned Citizen is trying to stop the creation of more killers. As well as this, there's also the images of fear part. Killing people counts as an image of fear, right? The next line is, machines of burnished gold adorned the great court of Byzantium, and their function was to terrify, to demonstrate wealth and skill, and suggest these things might be turned upon the viewer. Haha. The painting that the intercom commentates over shows the image of blue-cloaked people praising the golden board. The blue cloaks resemble those of the Mordor College. Did the Mordor College create the killer? And the turned upon the viewer part could refer to when the killer slaughtered the college. This would also give a reason to why the professor was dissecting so many dolls. Maybe he was trying to figure out the inner workings of such a thing to create his own unliving yet living entity. After some more dialogue and passing by images of the killer, Concerned Citizen appears behind BB and explains that his father decided to take the town's novelty amusement factory in a new direction that would change the history for a new age. However, the factory burned down after creating a singular drinking board Mark II, and the town was never the same. These are some really important details that kind of changed my previous theory. Concerned Citizen seems to be for the creation of a new history, agreeing with the Mortar College, but the false history he refers to is the records burning down the factory and other buildings, thus preventing this new history. I also think that the singular prototype board produced is likely the killer, since the loss of the factory would prevent more killers from existing, thus making it more difficult for new era murderers to happen. BB leaves the museum with a funny shot as Clarice watches from above. I didn't consider this until now, but it could also be possible that Clarice is the robot explained throughout all of this, and not the killer, since she's also aboard. Tired of everything going on, BB just decides to go home without re-establishing the Zine distro with Clarice. On the train home, however, it stops at the destroyed factory and the lights go off. At the end of the dimly lit train are the killer nurses and they run at BB. Suddenly, BB wakes up at a bed at a strange location. It seems to be the ruins of the drinking board factory. Inside the factory, it's full of letters from concerned citizens, the most of them completely irrelevant, such as him complaining about cinema popcorn prices and Happy Meals. At the end, however, is an idea he submitted for something called the Mary Wolf cartoon. The proposal tells of a story in which the protagonist Mary is depressed that she was promised a good life, but now only has the ruins of her parents' drinking board factory. She then reads a poorly made zine at a record store. The zine claims to be about history, except instead it's a false horror of history in which everyone she looked up to from books and statues are presented as killers. Everything she looked up to is now horrible. She then realizes that all of recorded history is a conspiracy that lies, naming the conspiracy zines, and that the evil records must be smashed and killed to prevent her life from getting worse and worse. This seems like an extreme self-projection of concerned citizens' own experiences, and actually changes a lot about my theory. From his perspective, BB is actually the record, destroying history by publishing her adventures as a zine. It seems that he has an extremely inaccurate view of the world, and BB's zines about the killer and such conflicted with that worldview and made him mad. However, he previously seemed to associate the records with the ones who were burning down the buildings, which BB obviously didn't do. This also reveals that Clarice was actually distributing the zines around town to locations such as the record shop, though it isn't really clear why she suddenly wants to kill BB now. And if she is a robot, why would she distribute the zines in the first place? Walking deeper into the factory, BB finds Clarice, who seemingly has no reaction to BB's presence. Apparently, Clarice's bored face is a mask. I don't remember that being revealed earlier, but BB kind of casually just mentions it. Before BB can satisfy her curiosity by taking Clarice's mask off, the two nurses appear and tell BB to stop, stating, "We made a real mess of her face getting all the pieces inside." They also tell BB that Clarice is harmless until you turn a key on her, so I guess it's confirmed that Clarice is a robot. The nurses then lead BB into a room with the concerned citizen. He reveals that the technology of the drinking board MK2 can be used to rewire human brains and that he infiltrated BB's network. By this, I think he means that he used the drinking board tech to take control of Clarice's brain to infiltrate BB's Zine network. He then says that he believes that BB is a national representative of the Zine organization sent to survey the situation and burn down buildings in the town. However, this brings up some really big issues. If the people burning down the town are not records, as in BB, but concerned citizens, the nurses and Clarice, are hunting down BB for supposedly doing so, then who did it? Then the killer appears, setting fire to the many papers the concerned citizen had written. Concerned citizen tries to kill BB to turn her into a drinking board servitor like he did with Clarice, hoping to kill the rest of the Zine distro, but is stopped when Clarice decapitates the nurses and chases after him. BB starts to escape during the chaos, but comes across the killer drinking the blood of the dead concerned citizen and is blocked by Clarice, who then pushes BB out of a window. BB luckily gets her clothes stuck on a tree and escapes safely, bringing an end to this extremely plot-filled adventure. However, we're still left with a few questions after that revelation-filled ending. First of all, where does Murderer X fit into this? It doesn't seem like he was involved with burning the houses down, but he is also clearly part of a bigger organization. Will this organization come into conflict with the Art Appreciators Club or the XX City Police Department sometime in the future? As well as this, why is the killer involved in this? XX City had an unusually high murder rate because of the killer, but why is he past Rivertown and all the way at this faraway factory? I thought the killer stayed at XX City. What motive does he have to specifically go out to the shut-down factory over a town away to burn it down? Is it because he doesn't want BB spreading zines about the information outside of XX City? As well as this, what happened to the Drinky Board 2 prototype? Its technology is used to control Clarice, but concerned citizens also plan to use it on BB, so it doesn't seem like a unique item. Could the original Drinky Board 2 be the killer, coming back to burn down the zines and factories so that no one could trace his origins back? Maybe something to do with the technology that concerned citizen is using could be used to exploit the weakness in the killer and stop him if his origin was revealed. Lots of future potential plotlines right here, and this game really makes it seem like the series is headed towards a much more plot-driven story. As for how I feel about Blood of the Killer, I really enjoyed it. The story was much more complex than the previous games, with a lot more going on with multiple parties at play. I really enjoyed trying to piece together the plot as I played, and the many plot twists and reveals kept me engaged. As well as this, the characters were a significant improvement from the cast of Flesh of the Killer. Every character, even minor ones like Murderer X, were memorable and fun. I have very high hopes for the next game, Ears of the Killer. Ears of the Killer starts with BB lying awake at night with the urge to kill, as in the music upstairs is too loud, though no one but her seems to be too annoyed with it. BB decides to travel to her neighbor's room and slip a passive-aggressive note. The door to her neighbor's apartment opens as BB approaches, however, revealing a room covered in a flesh-like sludge. Heading inside, BB finds an instrument playing a vinyl of Midnight Sex Party at Dracula's house by Bloody Hands and his Night Stranglers. Then, a path suddenly opens up behind a wall, taking BB to a strange realm. Entering a building, she finds the killer creating a small board out of the flesh sludge. Noticing BB, the killer chases after her, eventually capturing her and force-feeding her the flesh board. The scene cuts to black, and the next thing we see is BB singing in front of an audience under the name Bebe. BB walks out of the venue and is confused, seemingly unsure what is happening. She then gets interviewed by a zine writer, who then writes an article about BB sweeping the new wave of music with Catholicism. The most important reveal from this is that Jesus is canon to this universe. Back at home, BB listens to her own CD. It seems that she's unconscious while in her Bebe persona, which, judging by the lyrics about death, is probably just the fleshboard singing. Meanwhile, ZZ is getting ready for a new job running an email newsletter for a youth group in the beach district of the town. BB doesn't seem to care about this though, and uses ZZ's computer to research who Bloody Hands is. Apparently, he's an artist with extremely difficult to find records, with Midnight Sex Party at Dracula's house being the rarest, and it's been a while since a copy has been found. She finds a record store called Golden Grave Records and decides to head there for research. However, ZZ tells BB that she needs to attend the Retromaniacs convention in place of her since she's now busy being employed. BB doesn't want to do this and refuses. We then get something awesome, a character select screen. We can choose to follow the story of 3 different characters, BB, ZZ, and a currently locked character. I decide to follow BB's story for now. We start in the city, which looks really nice, one step closer to my dreams of a full RPG city made in this art style. BB arrives at the address of Golden Grave Records, though the sign says Funeral Man Coffin Warehouse. The inside looks like a coffin store, but the store owner, Funeral Man, assures BB that they will label for the new music. In the basement of the building, Funeral Man reveals a bunch of corpses hanging and dancing from the ceiling. The stores of tomorrow, he calls them. They are prototype models, however, and he is still working on getting the corpses to sing. Back at the player select screen, we now have the option to play as an unidentified corpse. I selected as my character and were greeted by unidentified corpse wearing a cat mask, and he starts to explain his backstory. He was once part of a novelty horror band called the Cat People. There was also another popular novelty horror band that had a maniac killer theme, and they would point at audience members, and then later their bodies would wash up on the beach. Sadly, the genre started to die out before it was ever big, bands broke up, and returned to the mainstream. Unidentified Corpse, however, believes that there is still a place for him underneath the waves. Back at the character select, Unidentified Corpse is no longer playable. I decide to follow ZZ's story, where she's now arriving at the beach district. ZZ enters the building of her new job and meets the old manager of the website. The rest of the office is gone, apparently sent on an official away mission. Looking at the site, it's extremely sus, and ZZ goes to confront the old manager. ZZ finds him recording aquatic mammal sounds on the record. He tells ZZ that back in the glory days of the company, the rest of the office hadn't yet departed to the level beyond human and vanished into the next realm never to return. However, at that moment, they returned. Now back at the character select screen, I choose BB. Funeral Man has ordered BB to go to the Retromaniacs convention to sell off some old band merch they had lying around the corpse cellar. Reading up some music news, BB's alter ego Bebe has been busy releasing some new music. With no customers, likely due to setting up her booth in an unregistered closet, she decides to walk around. After an encounter with a rabid music stand that almost kills BB, she runs away, ending up in a dark corridor. In one of the rooms in the corridor, we can see the director from Eyes the Killer giving a seminar about merging multiple concepts of serial killers into a single entity, a policeman. This doesn't really seem to have any relevance to the story at the moment, but it seemed like a noteworthy cameo of an older character. Walking to the end of a very long hallway, BB encounters a crying man, the hit murderer single known as The Weep Store, and he's going to cry for BB as he kills her and sings a song about how sad he is about killing BB, causing a music video-esque chase sequence. This is probably the most creative chase sequence in the game, with lots of cool visuals and mechanics, such as having 3D elements, being chased by a reticle of Weep Store's attack, and even switching characters to the Weep Store later on. The best song in the soundtrack, Weep Store's Lament, also plays during the sequence. Actual banger, and it's the song I'm playing in the background right now. During the song, however, the fleshboard takes control of BB's body and starts chasing the Weep Store. It catches him, and the game sends us back to the character select. The only character I can select right now is ZZ, so I continue on with her story. ZZ is showing off her improved website design to the newly returned employees, the site no longer looking like it was taken straight out of the 90s. The company only sells pure metal orgone items, but ZZ presents to the boss the idea of potentially selling non-pure metal orgone items as well. The boss finds this idea compelling and tells ZZ to look for anything in their basement that could be sold. BB heads deeper and deeper into the increasingly abstract basement and finds a vinyl by Blue D Hands. We overhear a voice stating that this used to be an inner sanctum of an old organization, likely a musical one based off of the theming, but now the company has changed directions. The voice asks someone to escape and build a life under the waves where there is no wave, but then we see a character flash on screen and the boss appears to have been killed when ZZ reaches back upstairs. Back in the character select, BB is available again. I choose her story, which starts in this trippy, nightmare-like place. She then wakes up on the beach, about to get beaten by cops who hate punk rock stars. BB then tells them that she's not punk, she's new wave, and the cops are surprised. There's a new wave? So the legends were true. They tell BB to see Mr. President, who is apparently a friend of the department, whatever that means. On the beach, you can find a Weep Store's clothes. Sadly, he's probably dead, killed by the wave. In a cave nearby, you can find the surviving members of ZZ's company. Oops, looks like we misjudged the cultural mood again. No Age of Aquarius this century. At least I get to go on a raid team this time. And then explains that they'll be back from the ocean in 50,000 years. Well, maybe that's why they were selling pure metal orgone items, thinking that it's the Age of Aquarius. But right now, it seems to me that the game is building up the new wave of novelty horror bands. I guess this also explains where the company members were at when ZZ first arrived. Going into the building that the police told BB to go to, she finds ZZ in the Aquarius people's office. ZZ is the only employee left, and she's doing a final round of liquidation on the items found in the basement. Apparently, someone is interested in buying a box of LPs she found, including a copy of Midnight Sex Party at Dracula's house. On their way to the meetup location, BB finds a newspaper explaining that Funeral Man was found dead, strangled by an unknown person at the coffin warehouse. The meetup location is a planetarium. The buyer turns out to be the same man who killed ZZ's boss, and he explains that he's been to the counter world, an alternate world. It turns out that he has Blue D Hands, and saw BB mention her in her zine interview from earlier. He's back from the dead, and he thinks it's time for a comeback and starts chasing BB. He says that he saw a red earth with a red sky with other people. which I think might have something to do with the red tint that appears when the killer does. He states that every building, person, and sentence is the same to him, and that's why he started killing. He captures BB in a bag, and the next thing we know, BB and ZZ are standing on the stage, along with Blue D Hands, 2 unidentified corpses, and the killer. They stand before the new wave, quickly approaching them on the beach. BB closes her eyes, entering the flesh sludge realm again. She bats down the flesh board, and Blue D hands his guitar string snap. Now back in the real world, ZZ unties the ropes and the killer is nowhere to be seen. The new wave is approaching faster than Blue D Hands has planned, and the 2 sisters run away. In the end, Blue D Hands' band disappeared with the new wave, and the new wave broke apart quickly. There's now lots of Reapstar clones, with 4 records claiming to be inhabited by the spirit of the Reapstar. BB's Bay alter ego also seems to have ended their career, and the Neo Dark Wave Motorcore split from Horror Wave Crime Punk, and this type of music in general had a decline, becoming underground, with the only lasting effect of the new wave being a Beach Boys revival in the summer. I have genuinely no idea what the killer had to do with the new wave, and I haven't been able to piece together anything other than the killer maybe wanting the genre to end. The story, despite having lots of characters, was a lot simpler than the last game. Though I think I liked Blood of the Killer more, Years of the Killer was a really good game, and I really enjoyed my time with it. It was definitely one of the more fun of the Killer games to play, with its variety of characters and extremely well written humor on the music waves. Out of the new characters, I especially liked the Reapstar and the Ocean People from ZZ's company. The Reapstar, other than having the best song in the series, also had some of the best lines in the game during his song. What little we saw of the Ocean People was also pretty funny, and I liked how abstract their dialogue was, though I wish we got to see a bit more of them. I'd say this is a top 3 of the Killer game for me, with Eyes of the Killer at number 2 and Blood of the Killer at a close 4th. And now, onto the 8th and most recent game, Heart of the Killer. The game starts out with BB waking up at this extremely trippy looking place called the Dream Resort. She has to fill out a participant survey when leaving her room, which looks about what you'd expect from the series. Wandering around the resort, I find a changing room where I get to choose between 2 different outfits that BB will wear. I think it's a neat idea. This will most definitely have massive consequences for the game's lore. After changing, there's another survey. Walking along a bit, BB passes by a dialer boy, which she refuses to touch. However, it looks like she could call Mike, Bob, Paul, Carlos, or Dave, whoever these people are. She passes the dialer boy and thinks about the events that led her to the Dream Resort. BB was working as a mystery shopper, but decided to quit, citing an existential crisis. However, her boss offered her one final job, the Dream Resort. Now back from the flashback, BB is still confused about what she's supposed to be doing at the resort. The next part of the game is spent wandering it. The visuals of the game are insanely good, the best in the series so far. Everything just feels so surreal, yet beautiful, and getting to wander around and see all the architecture was awesome. Eventually, a bell rings and we enter a room. It's time for focus group testing. I have to answer my reaction to a series of random items. Afterwards, BB goes to the bathroom and sees someone from behind the bathroom mirror. The person identifies themselves as Cece, another guest reviewer at the resort who edits a zine about strange occurrences in the city revolving around someone titled The Murderer. Seems slightly similar to BB. Apparently there's also other people here at the resort called HH, II, and JJ. Cece tells BB that they think they've found out what's going on at the resort, but have to wait until tomorrow to tell her. Now at night, BB wakes up, hearing the sound of a ringing phone. However, what looks like a monster appears before BB when she nears the dialer boy and she gets captured by it. Then BB wakes up, the event seemingly a dream, but she wakes up in a different bedroom from before. Leaving the bedroom, the surrounding halls and rooms also seem to be different. BB manages to find a restroom and finds a small tunnel behind a mirror that leads her to an ominously red room. She finds a document that explains the monster from last night is someone called the Spook. They have a master's in business from the University of Chicago and are part of the RAGGMOPP, a management facility that meets once a year in the Swiss villa to discuss forbidden business synergies. His existence has been denied so much that he has lost the form of his body and now uses a plastic bag to move around. There's also a key next to another note that simply says, "The Ivy opens after dark." Earlier when exploring, there was a door in the courtyard that was blocked off by some vines. Maybe this is some useful information. Also, here was a zine called Morsy's World, which apparently had an honest depiction of a maiden tort, having an extremely successful first issue but a flopping second issue. The bell then rings and BB goes to do her focus test. At night, the dialer boy starts ringing again. BB takes a peek out of her bedroom door and sees the spook standing nearby. She heads back into the bedroom and decides to escape through the window. Surprisingly, there was a survey on the roof. Who's placing them in BB's path anyways? And did they anticipate BB to escape through the roof? What's the plan of this person, and what does the spook have to do with this? Walking a bit more, the spook suddenly appears from a window and grabs BB. However, BB slams the window onto his arm and manages to break free. Now in the courtyard, BB finds the door behind the vines, but it's already open. She hits it anyways, and the sound of a dialer boy can be heard ringing in the distance of the darkness. And then, a voice calls out to her. BB, come quick. Don't you recognize my voice? It's me, the beloved, the one from your dreams. I'm here, in real life. I'm waiting for you. You know my name. Why won't you call it? All you have to do is call. I'm counting on you. Which one am I? Reach out. I'll be there. I need you to call. Call me. Call. It seems that BB is supposed to call one of the boys on the dialer boy. However, she refuses, and someone in a red mask appears before her. BB then gets captured by the spook and placed in a hyper-realistic suburb. BB is completely terrified by the appearance of the house, and a voice calls her downstairs. In the kitchen, a bleeding person claiming to be BB's sister asks BB if she's excited for today's festival, and that Greg from high school will be there. The streets are filled with dismembered heads and flesh. Entering a building at the end of the road, BB meets Greg, who appears to just be the spook in a bodysuit. Greg chases BB out the building, where she encounters the red-masked woman again. The woman is angry at BB. Oh what, you think you're too good for Greg from high school too? She places BB in a corridor full of scenarios, asking which death fantasy BB wants. At the end, BB finds a pamphlet that explains that the Dream Resort is a romantic horror simulacrum made by the OAGGMOPP and Consumer Survey Institute to get details on the love-death fantasies of the youth in a world full of mass death, and that the red-masked woman is Morsy. After her zine's second issue flopping, she became a consultant to clear her debt and met the OAGGMOPP. She asks BB to simply tell the dialer boy what she really wants, and BB reluctantly picks it up and calls for Cha-Cha the tree frog. While bickering with Maurice about the obscurity of the character, the spook absorbs the two and BB finds herself in a strange place and a voice calls out. Hooded figures watch each other in the corridors, scratch holes in the wallpaper where they can see and not be seen, leap out and drag themselves below to be tortured in a maze of secret prisons. This is the dream of the spook. At the end of the area is Morsy, who explains that she made Morsy's World No. 2 based off of how everyone wanted more of Morsy's World No. 1, trusting them, but people didn't know what they wanted, so she became a consultant to find out what people really liked. BB is then transported to another area as Morsy continues to explain. She states that everything she recorded was stored in the spook's memory. Morsy opens a door, offering BB the chance to know things about herself that only advertisers know. However, BB declines and wakes up outside of the already collapsing resort. She then went back home and played video games all day. Heart of the Killer was a strange game. It has some of the best consistent visuals out of all the games, and it was really good at setting the mood of a scene. However, I felt that it lacked in story. While the initial mystery was really intriguing, a lot of it never went anywhere, like the whole thing with Cece. There wasn't really much going on, especially compared to the later games in the series. However, I did like the ending, and the concept of the advertiser knowing you versus knowing yourself was a fun concept, although brought into the game a bit too late to be explored more, unlike the New Wave joke that was explained pretty thoroughly in the last game. The characters also felt a bit weak compared to the recent games. Cece got zero development or personality, which I felt was a missed opportunity to potentially build up more mystery during the first half of the game. Morsy was also not that memorable of a character. She had a fine backstory, but compared to how much more interesting the personality of characters such as Concerned Citizen and a Mortal College Professor are, I felt that Morsy was a bit bland. However, I still enjoyed my time with it. For my ranking of all the games least favorite to favorite, it would be Drool of the Killer, Voice of the Killer, Flesh of the Killer, Heart of the Killer, Hands of the Killer, Ears of the Killer, Eyes of the Killer, and finally, Blood of the Killer. The series in general is amazing, and there wasn't a single game in the series I thought was bad. The top 3 games, Ears, Eyes, and Blood of the Killer, specifically though, were the highlights of my playthrough. The series in general is criminally underrated, with very little YouTube content I could even find about the series. I'm pretty sure this might even be the first review of the series that exists in a video format, despite the series having gone on for years. As stated at the beginning of the video, all of the games are freely available to download on GameJolt, all made by Government District. Go show them some love and download the games if you haven't already. As for anything else I want to say in the video, during the scripting of this video, Government District put up a post on their GameJolt page about the next game in the series, which is apparently going to be the last one. It's supposed to be a bigger game, and I'm definitely looking forward to how the saga will be finished. Based on the screenshot provided, it seems like an assassination of the killer will take place during the game, which is really exciting. Maybe the game will be called something like Killer of the Killer. The only other body part that I could think of that would sound cool would be Rings of the Killer, which would also be a sick name. If the game is going to include the assassination storyline, or at least we already know that it includes entering the killer's nest, I'm really hoping that they expand upon the chase mechanics from Hands of the Killer. There's some mild stealth involved with having to sneak around the students during the forced chase sequence, and that kind of gameplay never returned in any future game. To see that expanded upon in the final game could be really awesome, and I think it could really work based off of the potential story we know so far. It also seems to be vaguely Western themed, based off of the character design, the revolver, and the wooden building, which is a theme the series hasn't covered yet. Overall, it's looking to be an awesome game, and I'd be down for covering the game in a future video if there's demand for it. I really enjoyed the time I spent playing through the Up the Killer series, so I guess you could say I'm a fan of the Killer. And if you're a fan of my content, why not subscribe? And I'll see you all in my next YouTube video.